Danny, pleasure to have you on the Gym Rats podcast. Start this conversation off by saying, how are you doing? And when did you get into golf? Because you're a stud.
I wish I had more time to play. I'm
Uh-huh.
definitely not a stud. I think at
Uh-huh.
one point in time in my life when I could play more, that's a game that if you play it, you can get good at it. But I think at some point in time, I think you have to have some talent, which I don't know that I have. But that's just something that I just like to do. It's a good escape, and it's a good 4 hours away.
There you go. Now, who influenced you, to start playing golf?
Well, my old man played, and so I grew up in a house where, I was trained that a lot of business happens on the golf course,
Sure.
and it's a game that teaches you honesty and integrity and following rules, and so it's a game that made sense to me, kind of growing up. But my dad, I used to play with him all the time, and to kind of pay it forward, my oldest son, who's a seventh grader, has gotten into it. He seems to really like the game too. He goes out and plays, 3-4 times a week. So I'll try to join him for one of those rounds, but that's kind of a cool way to come full circle.
There you go. All right. Transitioning to basketball, like what got you into the game of basketball? I saw you coach. You do a phenomenal job with the girls. Like what got you into the game?
Thanks. Well, I played. And so like a lot of coaches, it's a game that did a lot for me growing up. So to be able to get into coaching and we all say the same things, but to give back to the game that did so much for you is
For sure.
a lot of the reason why I did it. I never would have imagined in a million years that I would have had the opportunity to coach some of the players that, and against some of the players that we've had the opportunity to coach and coach against. I never in a million years would have imagined that. So that's been a fun ride, but it really kind of all happened truthfully by accident. Like years ago when I graduated college, I, like everybody, and I didn't play college basketball. I had the opportunity to do some NAIA stuff, Division III stuff, Division II. I wasn't a D1 talent by any means, which is kind of ironic in and of itself. But the guy that hired me right out of school was a big basketball guy. He played for Skip Prosser, may he rest in peace, out at Wake Forest.
Okay.
And when he was recruiting me to the company that he worked for, it came out that I played basketball and liked basketball. And so we engaged in kind of a friendly argument over an interview about what the basketball capital of the world was. And being an Indiana kid, growing up in Indiana, you have it ingrained in your head that Indiana is the basketball capital of the world.
No question.
And he, of course, playing for Skip Prosser, playing at Wake Forest, disagreed with that. Now, he was actually at one point in time the assistant coach at Cave Springs High School, which is where J.J. Redick went to high school, out in Roanoke, Virginia. So we engaged in this argument as to what the basketball capital of the world was. I ended up taking another job, ironically, within the same company, but in a different division, but then got involved in coaching with him. And so, and we can get into the details of that a little bit later, but it kind of gets up to this point.
So what's your coach philosophy? Like I'm learning transitioning outside of still playing, but also working here at Bosco Prep, coaching the kids. Like, do you have a philosophy when you coach, the young ladies that you do?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, and that answer has changed for me over time. Now the way that I answer the question is I think you have to adapt to your players and the way that the game is trained and played now more than ever. And what I mean by that is this, again, growing up in Indiana, we grew up in an area where motion basketball was everything, right? One guy holds the ball, four players will move around, and the one guy makes a decision based on what the other four players are doing.
Right.
And then you had the European influence with Popovich and D'Antoni and those guys coming into the NBA. They brought all the action to the ball. They made everybody else stationary. And now, I'm getting long-winded here, but you've transitioned now into this kind of positionless basketball, made famous by Golden State. And so I think now that's kind of where we are. So philosophically, I think it's important to adapt to what you have personnel-wise on your team. If you have a scoring point guard, to put a lot of the action, in their hands, give them an opportunity to score. If you have a facilitating point guard, for example, on ball action to help get them in the paint, help them create opportunities. Stylistically, I think the game has been played at least in my 10, 11 years of coaching, more than that, 19 years of coaching, 10 and 11 with the Gym Rats.
Right.
I think that philosophy, has changed.
No, I agree. And, the fourth, I'm a stretch 4-ish, 3, but the 5 men are trying to still shoot from half court, right? And then the rules don't change. Like, hey, dude, if you're the biggest thing on the court, fulfill what the team needs. Be that guy.
That's
because
right.
it's underrated now because people are trying to take these deep threes when dude, coaches are still looking for those glue guys that's going to take the charge, that's going to do the small things. You know what I mean? And that's the thing where I'm I found a niche where it's hey, this was my role, and that role that I play still applies in today's game.
No question.
So
no question. And I would add to that if you look at, if your skill is scoring the basketball, okay, and that's a very popular thing to talk about. Everybody wants to say that this kid can score at 3 levels, or a multi-level scorer, or a multifaceted scorer. If you look at the people that have best scored the basketball in the game's history, Jordan and Kobe, they developed the 3rd level later in their career.
No question.
So if you look at Jordan becoming, learning a back to the basket game, looking at Kobe learning a back to the basket game, learning post play. So where I'm going with that is, it's real easy to say that a kid's a 3-level scorer, but are they really?
Right.
Do you post guard? So, I don't know where we got into this, where it has become unsexy to play with your back to the basket, because the best scorers in the game became the best scorers in the game because they played with their back to the basket.
Carmelo, I'm a huge fan of Carmelo Anthony, and he played tremendous defense when he was at Syracuse. I watched that national championship game, and they're saying his transition of being a prolific scorer in the NBA, he's back to the basket. He doesn't take deep threes. I mean, he proved himself playing for Portland. Being a big piece on why they made it in the playoffs. And they had success in the playoffs despite that they lost. But he still plays back to the basket and sticks to the basics.
Yeah. Well, side note, by the way, so Harden's block the other night reminded me instantly of Hakeem Warwick's block in that Carmelo Anthony Syracuse game.
Big time. I watched it during quarantine, so that was my homework on watching the early 2000s college basketball championship game, because I was born in '93. So those games I did not watch it in detail how I watch games now.
Yeah.
And then you spoke of Gym Rats. How did you cross paths with Gym Rats?
So, and to kind of give you a little bit of history, I never intended for any of this to happen. I was coaching CYO basketball, and the story is that there was actually a parent that came up to me. I was just doing it volunteer-wise. Like I said, I was helping out my guy that was trying to offer me a job. And there was a parent that came up to me, and I didn't know her. And she just said, "Hey, I've got a summer AAU team. It's like the second best player at Carmel. It's the second best player at Pike, the second best player at Lawrence North. I mean, everybody had already plucked the best players, right? And I was a nobody. She said, "Would you like to take this team?" And so, I didn't know what I was doing coaching wise. I just knew that in CYO ball, it was kind of easy. We went to win a city championship in CYO if you have some talent maybe wasn't the most difficult thing in the world at the time. Not to devalue that by any means, but I take this basketball team and I take them when they're freshmen, I think rising freshmen. And by the time they all graduated, that team ended up having, I think it was 8 Division I players, 9 college players, 7 Indiana All-Stars.
Wow.
There was a kid that played in 2 Sweet 16s, another kid that played professionally out in Europe, another kid that broke the all-time scoring record at Miami of Ohio.
That's awesome.
Anyway, this is all kind of leading up to this. when that team graduated, I was done. I didn't have a team. I wasn't recruiting. I didn't have a shoe deal. It was none of that. And Courtney Moses, who's, runs Compete Training Academy up in Sweetser, Indiana, won Miss Basketball in 2010, and is one of the all-time great women's basketball players at Purdue. She calls me out of the blue one day and says, "Hey, Coach Danny," and I don't, okay, hello, who's this? And she's
what's up?
Like, "Well, this is Courtney Moses." And at the time, it was known. Like, Courtney was the best player in the state that season. And she said, "Do you have a team next year?" And I said, "Well, I don't." "No, I don't. I don't." She's like, "Well, are you going to coach a team?" I said, I don't really, Courtney, I don't really have anybody.
Right.
And she said, "Well, you got me. I'd like to play for you." And it was really kind of a flattering thing. I mean, Courtney and I'd coached against her a couple of times, but I had never talked to her on the phone. She just picks up the phone, calls me out of the blue. In fact, I was up at her barn at CTA not long ago. We kind of relived this story together. She said, "Well, you got me. We can build around me." And so kid up in Fort Wayne, Andrea Neubauer, whose older brother actually is the women's basketball coach up in Florida. She comes over. Liz Stratman, who starts at Xavier, she comes over. And all of a sudden, we've got the makings of a really good basketball team. There's a kid in Fishers, Indiana, who's a professional basketball player now. She finished high school in 2013 as the number 2 ranked player in the country. Her name was Taya Reimer. Nice. She became a part of that basketball team too. And that kind of national notoriety, having a kid like Taya, coupled with the momentum that coaching kids like Courtney provided, really kind of started to create a bunch of momentum. So that's the long answer to say James Banks, who at the time was the director of Gym Rats.
Shout out to Coach Banks.
Kind of just had a lot of momentum. He just kind of walked up to me and we just started to engage in a little bit of conversation. And, at the time I was starting a family. It's a lot of work to run a program.
I mean, balance. I mean, we have an hour-long conversation about how you have to balance off the court and on the court,
no doubt,
with your program. And that's a lot. I salute you guys, because I can only imagine, like, not everything is green in regards to parents, playing players and all. That's a whole nother conversation. You know what I mean? The stuff you have. Like, how do you deal with parents, though? Being truthful to these parents, like, you have to be straight up with them.
Yeah. I've been blessed to have to be surrounded by very supportive parents.
Nice.
I think there's a tacit agreement when you come and play for me that it's time to let go. And I think if there's that tacit agreement that it's time to let go, what I appreciate about the parents that we've had in the past is they implicitly trust what we're doing. And that's a really important thing. Have they all been like that? No, but for the most part, I think once you agree that somebody else is going to coach them and somebody else is going to try to help maximize potential, whatever it is that you're looking for out of a basketball coach, out of a basketball program, out of an AAU program, whatever it is, I think you have to implicitly trust that process. And I think parents have trusted me, and I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
And I return that. I mean, I don't shut them out by any means. They pay a lot of money and invest in that. And they want to make sure that if there's some feedback that needs to be given, that they give it.
No question.
They can always come talk to me. The unfortunate part about coming to talk to me is that they just better be ready for the truth.
Yeah.
That's sometimes a hard message to deliver. But I think for the most part, they've raised Division I athletes, and not all of them have been real hard on their kids, but that's a common thread, is that they're pretty demanding of their children, and that transfers over to me. They're pretty demanding of me as well, and if I'm not holding up my end of the bargain, they'll let me know.
For sure. No, in a heartbeat.
I accept that responsibility, and that's just something that I allow.
Yeah. No, for sure. Now, who are the coaches that influence you to coach how you coach today?
That guy that I mentioned, but his name is Doug.
Okay.
His name is Doug Meyer. He runs the Colorado Basketball Academy out in Colorado. Okay. He was the guy that first taught me it's very different playing the basketball game and coaching the basketball game, and kind of in between. I was the kind of I was the kind of player that had all the intangible things. Okay. I understood the game at a granular level, and I could explain it. But he was the one person that kind of molded my coaching style, I would say, most. But like anybody else, I just try to be around as many great coaches as I can, no matter the level. Whether, and it doesn't even need to be within basketball. I watch a lot of baseball, for example. I mean, just around great coaches that are around great kids, you can kind of mold things into your own personality. But my high school coach had an assistant coach by the name of Todd Grace, who coached over here Southeastern for a little bit. And he was a varsity assistant for me at the high school that I played at. He just seemed to get it. He seemed to know how to motivate kids, teach the basketball game how they wanted to be learned. And so those two guys probably have influenced it most. But the idea that stopped, that I stopped being influenced by coaches, is just not true. I mean, every day I learn something just being around different people, no matter the level.
No, appreciate it. And last segment that I have for you, Danny, who are the people that shaped you to be the person you are today? Who would you give that credit to?
Again, I'm an extremely extroverted person. Okay.
Nice.
And so I like to be around people. Okay. And
same here.
And so when you have an extroverted person, they'll process things however, through their interaction with people. So everybody that I interact with, whether it's a player of mine, whether it's a past teacher of mine, whether it's my parents, whether it's my kids, whether it's my family, whatever it is,
right,
those people are the people that kind of mold who I am. In taking that into coaching basketball too, I mean, I've learned a lot from, the Jackie Youngs, the Lindsay Corsaros, the Taya Reimers, the Dana Evans, the Sydney Parishes, the McDonald's All-American kids. And I've also learned a lot from the kids who, the Division, mid-major Division I kids, even Division II kids, the Emily Andersons, the Mary Wilsons, the Peyton Fallises, people like that. Everybody has their journey, but for me, it's such a cop-out answer, but everybody that I interact with kind of molds who I am.
Yeah, I mean, you have a village of people, just like myself. I mean, so many people pour into you from different areas that you wouldn't even believe. Like, man, I took some from this person that I don't even know for real, but I'm gonna apply that to my everyday life. So, no, I wanted to ask you that question because I saw you coach, I saw your team, everyone plays selflessly, and I just always wanted to have a conversation with you. So I was happy that the first annual golf outing was a success. So I'm glad we was able to connect.
Thanks for having us too. And I just wanted to use this as an opportunity too. Again, your audience, again, I would assume that the majority of your audience follows prep basketball, grassroots basketball,
for sure,
on the guy's side. I use this as an opportunity to evangelize the girls' side of basketball.
No question.
We have been extremely welcomed by the Indy Heat, Spiece, Gym Rats organization on the boys' side. But there's a lot of great things going on the girls' side. And, now more than ever, the societal demand, if you will, to notice these girls, I think, is more than ever. But I will tell you that you have great basketball. It's not just within the Gym Rats Club. All around Indiana in high school girls basketball, you have great people just like me and other clubs and other shoe companies that are doing great things for these girls. But there's great basketball. So I would encourage everybody to follow local girls basketball in your area, to learn more about it, to support these girls. And even beyond. I mean, we've got girls that, out of the Gym Rats Club here alone, I mean, we've had the number one player selected in the WNBA draft the same year that Zion Williamson was. I mean, everybody knows who Zion was, but it's a shame that people don't know who Jackie Young is. This year, there's going to be two kids probably selected in the top 10 who both wore Gym Rats jerseys in the WNBA draft this year, in Dana Evans and Natalie Patberg. And you've got kids like Madison Layton, who's starting at Purdue, who, and Sydney Parrish starting at Oregon, and you've got Jory Allen who went from IU to DePaul, and
Big time
these
players.
kids. I'm just talking about the missed basketballs, but it
Right.
just runs deeper than that as well. So I just encourage everybody within your audience that girls basketball has a lot of great stories behind it. It's engaging. These girls are great, and you could really become a fan of girls basketball and these girls.
It's huge, Danny, and I appreciate you sharing that. And like I said, I can't wait for people to hear this interview and know that, like, you guys, the EYBL girls, and like Gym Rats, what you guys do on the girls circuit is huge, and we appreciate you.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it.